Tonight I have something a little special for you. So, Tiny passed away on Friday, and her death is still very fresh for me. And it's going to take me a little while to process, so I wasn't sure I could keep myself together on video. So, I decided to use her passing to learn what the spiritual lessons are that I learned from her that I can pass on to you. So, in the spirit of sticking with our weekly wisdom from the cards, I'm focusing on these spiritual lessons that I learned from Tiny and asking the cards to help me identify them and pass them on to you. So, today I asked, show me 3 spiritual lessons I've learned from Tiny, and using my Galactic Heritage cards, I pulled 3 cards for us. The first one is number 48, Atlantean Era. The second one is number 77, Being the Mentors. And the third one is number 100, The Ultimate Revolution. So, as you probably know, I love reading the book with this deck. It talks about life lessons and karma, and it really always helps me to have a new perspective on things. And in this case, perspective of the book was immensely helpful. So I'm going to read you some of the highlights of the book. So the first card, number 48, Atlantean Era, says the past 13,000 years were about the masculine principle, which is about war, polarity, ignorance, and confusion about spiritual identity. It's a time of darkness and sleep. Humanity is moving out of this time now, and we are seeing the old ways crumble. Do not be discouraged by what you see. Consider it a sign that humanity is awakening again. This card asks you to examine your own life and beliefs. Do you feel more comfortable with one polarity more than the other? So that would be masculine or feminine. Ultimately, our spiritual evolution depends on our ability to integrate these internal polarities as a first priority. Only then do we see the external polarities healing as a result. So at first I was confused by what Tiny could have taught me about this lesson, but this card really is about moving away from one polarity into balance of the two. So let the masculine and the feminine have equal say. Trust your feminine instincts and energy because they will tell you when to operate from the masculine principle and when to stay in the feminine flow. So a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I owned a dog boarding facility and doggy daycare back when I lived in Tennessee. And I studied dog behavior from a trainer named Nikki Ivy, and she was totally an expert in dog behavior. She was awesome. And she taught us all about dog daycare and learning how to communicate with the dogs or how the dogs communicate with each other. Most people do not know the language that dogs use to communicate with each other. And we learned this rating system for evaluating a dog in daycare, and we rated them on, I think, 7 different aspects like of their personality. And one was their dominance level. So there was dominant, there was submissive, there was nervous, there was a few other things, and there was flexible. Flexible was a very, very rare type of dog. It was a dog who was dominant, but only in certain times, certain circumstances. At other times, when the dog didn't need to be dominant, the dog was flexible. Well, Tiny was a very rare flexible dog in daycare. She had a very dominant air about her. Her energy was dominant, but she would only act dominant if necessary. Now, dominant dogs, when they were truly dominant, only dominant, they wanted to be the leader of the pack no matter who else was in there, and that can cause issues. But a flexible dog like Tiny, if there was another dog that was dominant in the pack, she was like, okay, whatever, go ahead, I don't care. She was so great about that. So it didn't cause a problem because she didn't care. Now, you might think that this made her submissive, but she was not truly a submissive dog. When it was necessary, she was dominant. And as a matter of fact, we used to use her for evaluating difficult dogs in daycare because her energy, just her energy, and being in the play yard was so dominant. She was so queen-like that her energy was enough to change another dog's behavior without her ever interacting with them. So if we had a problem dog, we could put Tiny out in the play yard and we could bring this problem dog out into the play yard, and they would change their behavior without her ever interacting with them because she was so dominantly aired. But you didn't need to use that dominance in a masculine way. It was her presence that did it. So if you think about this in the lesson, where can you be more flexible in your life? Where can we all be more flexible? Where can we just use our presence to show up and to step up instead of charging in like a bull and, you know, taking things over? Like, we don't need to do that. We can use our presence. Where can you relax your masculine, charging in like a bull energy, and let your feminine step up to lead a little bit more in your life personally and in your interactions with others? Like, there's a big lesson in that. So think about that story and think about how you interact with other people and how you take charge of your own life. Do you always have to do it in a dominant way where the dominance is the only presence? Or can you allow the allowing energy, the being energy, to be present and be the leader in your life? So that's the first lesson. And I love that when I remember that story. The second card, and before I go on to that, this picture is Tiny and another dog in a daycare yard. And it might look like they're just smelling something, but what they're doing is they are communicating. They're giving calming signals. And what probably happened, I was not here on this day, but I know Tiny well enough to know that that little white dog was probably giving calming signals. And Tiny said, okay, if that's what you want to do, you want to calm, we want to just hang and chill, let's do that. And she just followed the little dog's lead. She let the little dog lead and let her own energy be of comfort to the other dog by honoring the other dog's need. Anyway, side note. So card number 2, number 77, being the mentors. The book says, since ancient times, our planet has had non-human mentors who have helped us through our evolutionary challenges. Now, the book is coming from the perspective of, in this card deck, from aliens, basically, from other species out in the galaxy. But not all non-human mentors are aliens. Sometimes they are our pets. Sometimes they are trees. Sometimes they can be things in your environment. Eventually, humankind will be mentors for other lesser evolved species we will encounter in the universe. But even now, we have the responsibility to spiritually mentor those on Earth who ask for our help without forcing it. Trust in your ability to help others, even if you think you don't know how. Let your words and deeds come from your heart. That's all you need. No matter what, know that the mentor-apprentice relationship is one of the most sacred in all of creation, and being asked to fulfill this role either as a mentor or as an apprentice is a blessing. Embrace this role with your full heart and notice how it enriches your life. Like, there's so much that I can say here about what Tiny taught me about this. She was definitely a mentor to me, even though during her life, I was the one who thought I was in charge. But that's not really true. Really, she was. And she was the one teaching me about how to be a better human. And I'm more than blessed to have had her as a mentor in my life. And I totally see and acknowledge now how I was really the apprentice. She was the evolved being. She taught me how to be more present. And, knowing her time was becoming limited, about, well, probably 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we diagnosed her with her big problem. And I decided that whenever she intruded her little head into my space and demanded my attention, which she did very often, when I'd be sitting in my office chair, she would come and stick her head between the arm of the chair and put it on my lap and demand my attention. And I decided whenever she did that, that I was going to stop whatever I was doing and be present with her and love on her as much as she wanted. Because I knew that her time was going to be limited. And she taught me that there's always time for love. She taught me some patience for dealing with her disease. It was very frustrating and very difficult. And she took it in stride. She took it one day at a time and helped me to do that with her as well. And she helped me to find some peace in my mind, body, and spirit through all of that. And I don't feel much of it right now, but it's there. And she definitely taught me about unconditional love, both giving of it and receiving it, which I'll talk more about in a later slide. And she taught me about what's important in life and helped me to do more of what's important. And she kept me sane a lot. Now there's a sticker that you see on people's cars who have rescued animals, and it says, "Who rescued who?" And that's true. Like, we think we're the ones doing the rescuing of the animal, but is that really true? Who's really the rescuer, and who's really the apprentice? We have been very wrong in our line of thinking that we're the ones doing the rescuing. So think about this as the lesson. Who and what are in your life that you're learning from? And yes, you might have ET guides, alien guides, as this card is literally suggesting. But you might also have other influences that are teaching you what you need to know. And even if they are your children, or your friends, or people who come into your life, or your enemies, or your animals, your fish, I mean, birds. Watch them. Watch the trees. Who are your mentors and who are you learning from? Pay attention to that. And take what you learn to heart and really implement it in your life, because at some point, it's going to be your turn to lead and mentor other people or other beings or other things. And honestly, it often happens in a very unofficial way. It happens a lot by people just observing you and how you do life. So they observe your behavior and how you treat yourself, how you treat others, how you deal with challenging situations, how you honor your own truth, how you care for yourself, how you care for the things that you prioritize, how you even set your priorities about what's important. You never know who is watching. So yes, plan for a time when you will officially take a role as a mentor. And if you already have, then know that that is also going to show up in new ways, new and bigger ways always, as we're always growing. So learn from your mentors who are around you now and look at more than the people who are, ahead of you in some way. Look for the people who you think you're mentoring, and look for the beings who you are taking care of, you think you're taking care of, and look in your environment, because they're all around you. Your most important mentors will be the ones who are the quietest about it. And prepare yourself. And then live your life in accordance with what you learn and how you want to be in this world. Don't live your life in accordance with what you think people want to see, but live in alignment with who you want to be and use what you learn from your mentors. because you never know who is watching and following your lead and using your life as guidance. Okay? That's a big one. And then the third lesson from Tiny McGee, that's one of her many, many, many nicknames, is number 100, Ultimate Evolution, which is kind of cool. So the book says, this card represents the birth of a new species, and we can translate that as the birth of a new self of our own. The Zetas, who is the species that it's talking to, transform themselves from a species of fear and limitation to one of higher consciousness, compassion, and love. It was not an easy road, but an immensely fulfilling one. This card represents your personal evolution. You have the capability to make dramatic changes in who you are by walking through the fire, confronting it rather than avoiding your fears, asking for help, and trusting the process. Your galactic family is with you. You are not alone. This card refers to the profound evolution that happens when beings confront their fears and the issues they don't want to see. It's not about looking away from your fears while surrendering to the process of owning their presence in your life, embracing them as teachers, having gratitude, and never ever judging yourself because of them. That's what it's really about, is looking at your fears and owning them, embracing them, having gratitude, and never judging yourself because you have these fears. This leads to compassion, self-responsibility, self-respect, and the ability to receive and give infinite amounts of unconditional love. This comes up a lot today. This process is so powerful that if everyone in the whole human race were willing to clearly see themselves and do the work necessary for evolution, Earth could transform within a very short amount of time. Think of that. Like, do your part, really. This card is encouraging you to accelerate your evolution by activating this process of clear sight and self-acceptance for the purpose of your evolution. That's what the book says. So one of my biggest fears in my life for the last 13 and a half years was Tiny leaving me, like her whole life. I was so protective of my dogs, especially her, from getting lost, getting stolen. She's a pit bull, and I used to be part of pit bull rescue, and I've seen all kinds of terrible things, and I had a fear of her getting blamed for something because of her breed and being taken from me. I had a huge fear of her being taken from me, and that included her death. And I do feel very, very fortunate that I could see her death slowly coming because she was diagnosed with an illness, and then she developed other illness because of that. So I was slowly starting to prepare for it. And yet it happened as a surprise last Friday. And are we ever prepared to face our biggest fear? I don't think we are. Last Friday I walked outside and found her body. And it was my biggest fear slamming me over the head like a 2x4. Like, I had no choice but to face it because it was facing me. I had no choice. I was home alone. My husband was 2 hours away. I had to face it. So I did what I had to do. Now, there's a lot to the story, but the short version is that I faced my fear and prepared her body to leave and to have to say goodbye, and to know that the inevitable of her leaving was confronting me. And it was not easy by any means, but I did it. And the grief that has faced me since has not been easy, but I am facing it. And I'm choosing to face it and to feel it and to let myself feel what I need to feel and remember her and be sad and talk to her and, hibernate from people right now, because I know that by feeling and experiencing this grief, which is totally part of the fear, is how I will heal. Avoidance never heals. Being tough and fighting your way through something never heals. Hiding never heals. What heals and creates strength is being scared to death and doing it anyway. And what's interesting about this process is that facing these fears, for me, are making me want to stop hiding after I'm done grieving. But I feel like, screw it. Why am I not out there speaking and doing bigger things? Like, I've just faced a huge fear and I'm still alive to talk about it. And now I want change. Like, I feel it in my guts and I feel it in my bones. I want to change my environment to be more designed in alignment with my next level of being. Like, I'm done waiting and procrastinating. That's how I feel right now. And I know that wanting to change the environment after someone dies and wanting to go out and, quote, live life to the fullest are part of the grieving process. And I don't know, this is something new for me, so I don't know if people actually follow through with all of those things, but I do know those are the feelings that are coming up right now. And I know that there are psychological reasons associated with the death of someone you love for wanting those changes, because you don't want, in a way, you don't want to be reminded that they're not with you. But think about this, changing your life, no longer waiting for something to happen to you and instead initiating it to happen for you, like changing my environment for the better, painting and refreshing life, or living a fuller life, or taking more risks that are scary, like speaking, doing speaking gigs or whatever. I think those can be the positive sides of facing your fears and facing, for me, facing this death of my little soulmate. And once you face your fears, they are no longer unknown monsters that you don't know if you can fight. They become known. You have experience. You know what to expect. So they stop being the enemy. So when you're scared and you say, I'm doing it anyway, whether you're choosing to do something anyway or you're forced to face your fear and do it anyway, you develop courage and strength you didn't have before. And the thing that scared you becomes way, way, way less scary, and you become more empowered. So my advice from Tiny to all of us is to look at what scares you and do those things first. Face your fears. Do something that scares you every day. Even if it scares you just a little, do it. Because it's not going to kill you, and it's only going to make you stronger. And be grateful for the things that scare you, because they're opportunities that are presenting themselves to you so you can become the next version of yourself. Now, we have a couple of ladies in this group who are right now doing just that, facing their fears and putting themselves out there in ways that were scary when they first did it, and maybe still scary. And I would love for them to talk in the comments about what's happening for them and to them as they face their fears and open up. So for me, there's been a lot of freedom associated with doing this. Even though I'm still very, very sad and upset, I still feel the freedom welling up inside of me. And I am curious to hear what they say, because the fears they're facing are totally different. So I'm inviting you guys all to use the group to support you as you face your fears and find the freedom welling up inside of you as you do that. Okay, so let's have some conversations about it, and let's help each other face our fears and get to our next levels. So I just want to summarize, check this out. The order in which I pulled these cards today, they're in order in the deck from lowest to highest. And they're really like the key highlights of our path of personal growth. So the first one is, be more balanced in the masculine and the feminine. Allow the feminine to lead. It will let you know when the masculine energy is necessary. So listen to it. This is your intuition. Allow your feminine energy to lead when it needs to. It's your intuition. The second one being the mentors. learn from your mentors. They may not be who you think they are. And then share what you learn formally and also just in the way you live your life, because you never know who is watching you for guidance. Show up and be yourself. Live in your highest integrity, and that becomes mentoring that you offer to the world. And then the third one, number 100, ultimate evolution. Face and embrace your fears. They build courage and strength. They bring freedom and empowerment that you have never known before, and you have support in this group to do just that. So that's our lesson for today. Now this morning, before pulling any of these cards, I asked for a sign that Tiny is with me. And a couple hours later, I pulled these 3 cards that I just shared with you, and then a question popped into my mind immediately. This is part of that desire for change and the freedom that is coming up was, what does my future hold for me? And so I pulled a card. And I pulled this card. This became my sign and our bonus lesson. So I pulled unconditional love. And I actually kind of laughed because I knew it was my sign from Tiny that she is with me. And I also realized that this is a lesson for all of us. And I knew this was a sign from her because I have never pulled this card from this deck before. And I know I haven't pulled it because when I pull cards, I scan their images so that I can share them with my clients. And this one was not scanned, so I know I've never pulled this. So I am sending my immense gratitude to Tiny for sharing this with me and sending me her unconditional love. And then I was reading the book. And so the first thing, of course, that I took from this card was that I'm receiving unconditional love from Tiny for all time, for all eternity. Because we have a bond that cannot be broken because her physical body is gone. It's being transmuted into its next form, but that does not stop the love from existing. Love is energy that can never be destroyed, and that's for all of us. Love is energy that can never be destroyed. And then when I was reading about the card in the book, it means so much more. So unconditional love means self-love or self-acceptance or loving others. The universe loves itself unconditionally, and since we are of the universe, it stands to reason that we love ourselves unconditionally. For me, this works with my word of the year, which is goddess. And I picked that word because it's a reminder for me of how I want to treat my body and myself this year so that I can grow and heal. And if I focus on unconditional self-love, I will heal. Now, when I was writing this and thinking this to myself, I almost said that I will heal my physical ailments, my health, some of the health things that I have. But what if that's not the way it's supposed to go? What if healing for all of us simply means true self-acceptance as we are, with everything about us that we think is imperfect? So that's what this year is about for me. If Tiny can love me unconditionally as I loved her unconditionally, then I can love myself that way. We all can. That is a right and an ability that each one of us has that nothing or no one can take away from us. And we don't need anyone's permission to love ourselves. We don't need to be certain. We don't need to be a certain way. We are of the universe, of God, of goddess, of spirit, of creation. That means we are of perfection as our imperfect human selves, and we owe ourselves unconditional love. So think about this way too. I also love Tiny unconditionally. So there was nothing about her, physically, mentally, spiritually, or otherwise, that I did not absolutely love. And this was a big awakening for me just today as I was thinking about this. As her body started to deteriorate, so I love the pit bull bully breed, because they are such beautiful, muscular, fit, just gorgeous creatures. And as she got sick, her body started to deteriorate. She got scarred, her skin got saggy, her eyes got droopy, her bones were sticking out, she had hair loss, her teeth were bad, everything. And as her body deteriorated and her physical form dwindled, I still thought she was the most magnificent, most beautiful creature ever. I only saw beauty in her. I loved her 1,000,000,000% with her scars, her hair loss, her droopy eyes, her bones sticking out, her dirty teeth, her bad breath, her aged skin, all of it. Because it was her light, which was her love, that shined so brightly and made all of that physical stuff completely unimportant as far as love goes. That's what unconditional love is. And she taught me what it meant to love unconditionally. And she gifted me with the feeling of giving unconditional love to her and with the feeling of receiving unconditional love as well, because she didn't care about any of my physical flaws or limitations. She loved me at a soul level, like I loved her at a soul level. So the lesson here is, what in your life has helped you experience the feeling of unconditional love, both in giving it and in receiving it? Even if it's an object, like a tree. Think of a tree that's old and scarred and withered and loses its leaves and has limbs broken. Those of us who love trees and we can tune into their energy and feeling, we love them and we think they're beautiful no matter what. So use that kind of energy, whether it's with a person, an animal, a tree, a crystal, anything. Use that feeling to tune into what unconditional love feels like in your body and practice radiating that back to yourself. If someone or something else can love you unconditionally, regardless of your humanness, and you have experienced that, and you know what it feels like to love someone or something else unconditionally, then you have all the skills you need to turn that love back around to yourself. This is about unconditional self-love. Now, it'll take your will and some practice, but you can do that. You can love yourself unconditionally. I can love myself unconditionally. We can learn to do that. It's something to learn. So let's make that a goal of ours this year, to love ourselves unconditionally. Okay? Now, your reading for the week, the question that I'm asking is, what signs are around you that you are unconditionally loved? Because you are. By someone, somewhere, something, somehow. By spirit, you are loved unconditionally. And I'll post your cards in the comments of the post as I usually do. And I'm going to pull a card for everyone in the group this week. So you'll all get a card, and I'll tag you with your card. And thank you for indulging me and letting me make this video as part of my processing. But this week you have an assignment. I'm not going to read your card for you when I post it in the comments. It's for you to determine the signs that are around you, showing you unconditional love. Only you know what that feels like and what that means. So do a reading on the card for yourself that I pull for you. Let us know in the comments by the card what it means to you, and report back to us as you start experiencing the signs. Look for the signs. Demand to see the signs because they exist. And if you ask to see them, you will be shown. So open your eyes and experience unconditional love. Give it and receive it and reflect it back to yourself. Okay? So I'll post your cards shortly. I love all of you, and thank you for being with me.